世间所有的相遇，都是久别重逢。
清风明月如怀抱。
世间所有的相遇，都是久别重逢。
清风明月如怀抱。
We're living in a most exciting age, at least probably for the 500 years, AI and robotics is going to redefine human, in terms of life science, individual behavior, right? Healthcare, so on and so forth, and also the business ontology. It's going to be seeing a paradigm change, right? And obviously the wealth, what money is and how we're going to accumulate wealth, right? Finance especially, right? The new rails for money movement, right? The wealth of nations. Nation is the fundamental defining factor for your wealth. Doesn't matter where you live, right? It is a struggle, if you will, between the nations, right? The wealth of nations, as Adam Smith put it. It's going to have a new reincarnation, right? So that is where the AI and robotics list in its three factors, right? Going to trigger the new industrialization or re-industrialization, right? So the latest evolvement in the Middle East, right? The strike against Iran, right? So far, according to the news from the White House, seems the supreme leader of Iran was killed. Right? I mean, it is very bad news and very sad news, right? It signals to me, right, it is a strategic error from the US side, right? First of all, it clearly used AI in terms of the military strike, right? Surveillance and the collection, analyze the data, the calculations, right, of the strike, right? Satellite, radar, so many chains of data into play, right? Obviously, there are AI involved, right? So it is a classic use case, if you will, AI in war, right? Okay. Now, when I say it is a bad news, not from anything else, just strategically removing a supreme leader or head of the state, it's not a sound strategy, right? Especially a country like Iran has long history, right? The AI is too simple, too naive, if you will, in the eyes of religion, right? Religion is way more complex, right? the death is not death, right? It's a martyr's way, to dedicate the life, right? What it triggers, it solidifies the unity, not only Iran but beyond Iran, right? It's going to create huge backfire against the U.S., right? I mean, on surveys you won, but really, it's not that cannot be calculated using probability, right? Like AI, okay? It's not a lot of logic there, okay? It is, you're dealing with religion, right? Beliefs, right? Okay, 900 million. 90 million, right? You're dealing with a lot of brilliant minds there. So what it signals to me that I used to make just one session probably, but then I think need to double it or triple it, right? The pace of AI and robotics advancement is going to pick up the pace, right? And especially no longer just in the military side, but in medical research, in life science, as I mentioned, the healthcare, right? And in the finance side, it's going to be really pays off, right? Now, the business, right? The nature, the paradigm of how we have been doing business in the past century or so will be very soon fundamentally changed, okay? And that is the power of AI. That is the most preeminent use of AI, if you will. And robotics comes, it takes a few more years to see that physical AI. But right now, we're if you look at it, just simplify it in 1, 2, 3, we're in a step. End of step 1, not yet over, but we're getting to step 2. That is using AI to do some, voiceover, the simple clips, the video, writing PPT, compose some articles, right? It is still very kind of dry, but done a good job, sufficiently, good enough job, right? I'd say that, right? So very soon that, those kind of creativity will be sucked up into the AI, right? Doesn't matter multimodal language model or language model, world model, whatever you name it, right? It's going to be AI. That's what I'm getting into as well, right? Making the from the business side to engage my clients, my customers, right? My investors, just to illustrate what my business is about, right? What is the product about, right? Not using dry, technological jargons to impress people. Nobody's impressed, right? Nobody wants to know so much algorithms, right? How the 6 layer of architecture, from elements to energy, from infrastructure to information, from chips to computing. Nobody wants to know that stuff, right? Nobody even interested in, not many people are interested in what a large language is, why it's domain specific, what is business ontology. Those are just for specialists like me, right? Who in the business, create business, building products, right? Solving problems, right? Redefining strategy, right? For the large enterprises, right? And then very soon it's going to be, AI apps, right? Like AI agents, agentic AI, doesn't matter what you call it, Many more devices get into the embodied AI, physical AI, and essentially, right? It's going to be solving robotics in my terminology, right? Those are coming, right? And the latest events signals to me they're going to pay off, right? On the other side, you watch the Genius Act, Clarity Act, BlackRock and JP Morgan they all get into Ethereum, if you will, and some European banks also join. It also seems to me they're picking up the pace, right? Nobody can predict the future, really. Nobody can really have a magic crystal ball and tell the future, but you can feel it, right? Like, to me, I cannot put my finger on it. I cannot articulate so well yet, but I can feel it, right? It's coming, right? The moment is closer, right? The moment is not AGI, right? It is that that it turns off, right? The finance part, right? The business ontology, how we do business, human life science, right? The spirit of war is waking up call, right? It is dragging you into a storm, right? All of a sudden, right? Especially, it is easy to start a war, right? It is also easy to claim victory, but the consequence is way severe, long-tailed, right? That is where a strategic error like this one from the US side will force it to space up the research and development and embracing the AI and robotics, right? It's about the last part of real innovation is going to be from, right? Get into the energy, get into the elements, you know. Building data centers even is too slow for them, right? Yes, it is, right? You have to be, if you are in that kind of mindset, you're going to eager to show quick result, you know, quick profit, right? Everything has to be quick, you know. President Trump seems to be a very smart person, you know, very respectful, but that businessman kind of mindset, right? For profit, for quick profit, kind of, is probably underestimating what politics is, what military is, right? What religion is, right? What people's faith can be, right? Probably they try to use advancement of AI and robotics to compensate that, and they will. They don't really have any other options, right? So, to me, the direct result, I have to double the capacity, double the speed, or triple it, right? So I have to be realistic, though, right? I have taken step one, building my MaicroStudio, making movies and building local run, you know, large language model, agentic net, you know, frameworks, right? But the real profit, real big change, right? Everybody knows about is in the enterprise agentic AI, right? Or simply enterprise AI. It doesn't have to be agentic. There are many ways to use it, right? So, given the DeepSeek moment about a year ago, is already declared the end of large language model that so many companies still very hot on. That's done. That game is over, right? It's no longer a sort of insurmountable challenge. It's already solved. So this book, for example, I've been reading for a year. It's a fantastic book, but it's a solved problem, right? Next, going to be agentic, some frameworks, and everybody rushing into it. Kind of Meta, the acquisition of miners, right? And OpenAI, Google, you know, Elon Musk's XAI, Microsoft, Mega. They all Meta. They all get into it. Equally brilliant. The DeepSeek, they have agentic framework. The Alibaba has it, you know, Minimax released the latest. They all done brilliant work at JLM. No longer, still competing, right? I don't say decisively who is the winner, right? And probably it's not going to be just one winner takes all, right? It's going to be pretty competitive, right? They're all competing for the enterprise agentic AI, enterprise kind of cake, right? Like NVIDIA put it, right? So that is the thing I need to think through, okay? I'm no longer, for this part, I don't want to use any visuals, just talk through if it makes sense or not. It's basically how I think through, right? So try to give it a title, right? Keep it simple. Like 10 years ago, I gave it enterprise AI, right? But now it evolved into agentic workflow agents kind of thing, right? My emphasis, anything to do with robotics or agent, the first word, the first concept in my mind is sovereignty, right? I would rather call it a sovereign agentic AI framework, or SAFE for sure, right? For short. It can be for like personal use, consumer, a small business. It can be for big business, large enterprise, right? Like hospitals, banks, governments, manufacturers, supply chains, right? Or military campaigning, right? Use, right? Armies, right? They call it collectively enterprise. It doesn't have to be for profit, right? Safe and sound, right? So just name this sovereign agentic AI framework, right? Safe for sure, right? As the acronym. That's my proposal, right? So what do I mean? How do you make it happen? I'm going to take large banks, for example, because I'm currently engaged in some big clients there, right? A lot of talks, right? Different consulting firms like McKinsey, BCG, Deloitte, and others, right? They all have different proposals. I'm way smaller player, right? And probably don't demand a lot of respect. But again, I think my proposal probably excel, practical and strategic, right? Mitigate the risk, grow the business, and really solve the problem. And more than that, just redefine your business model, right? How you should use AI is more strategic growth, not just solving an old problem. I keep saying that, right? But exactly how are you going to do that, right? Again, my business architecture has always been the 6 layers, right? And lift on the right, on the left, and wall on the right. The top of which is how, meaning redefine the human, like workforce, right? Human workers, robotic workers, right? Agents, you name it, right? And ontology, business ontology. How are you going to use the AI effectively? You need to build business ontology, right? And where I propose a domain-specific multimodal model, well, it can be a large language model, right? Any voice model, VLA, vision language action model, world model, It's not money, right? It's going to be money. It has to be way more diversified and, scale from like a spectrum, smaller model, big models, different use cases, right? For different business scenarios as well, right? And eventually the wealth part, the real of money, the way how you tokenize your asset, for example, financial asset, not specifically has to be physical asset or data, right? The tokenization is key, right? But, those on the top, on the left is going to be the law. We need new regulations, legislation, right, to regulate the AI. The guardrails has to be there. Right? Then the eyes for industrialization doesn't mean, we encourage you to abandon the current industrial base and embrace the AI, change everything like, what some other vendors propose to recreate the mainframe part. It's like, I'm going to build a highway using AI and robotics, right? Give it so much intelligence. No, that's not what I want you to do, right? Focus on the top goal rather than a specific problem, because in the age of AI, many of the old problems become irrelevant, right? Many of the old business model will no longer be applicable. For example, the finance part, right? Okay, they don't invest so much that to modernize your wire transfer if you have a server room locked in the corner of your bank and a couple operators sitting there every day, processing the wire transfer. I mean, you give them AI tools, you give agentic tools. It's only adding risks, right? It's not going to work. It's not the way you use AI, right? Because that kind of business model, that the money transfer protocol, is not designed for AI. It's not designed for the era of AI, age of AI, how money moves, right? To the point of, shaking that tree, give it AI kind of flavor, make it agentic. You don't need to do that. It's not. How do you justify the return on investment, right? You're going to face a lot of music, really, if you were the CIO or CEO propose that, right? Just to use an extreme example, but many CIO and CEOs propose exactly that. Probably they have, what the respected consultant from McKinsey, BCG, or Deloitte, or PwC, or whoever, right? But doesn't mean in a year of AI, it makes everybody equal, right? They don't necessarily know more or have a better strategy, because the individual does not even understand AI himself. He may have a good reputation, but it doesn't help, right? You need authentic thinking power, right? The human intelligence is still the king, right? It's not like you have more PPTs, you will know AI better. No, okay? And sometimes you have 100 really senior consultants, they're world famous, right? Doesn't mean they know AI better than a smaller firm, individual consultant like me, right? Because I, like in a war, I fight in the battleground, right? At the same time, I can also become a military commander, right? I have the capacity, which is why, I give you just plainly, without any visual, right? What I think, okay? Sovereignty is the key word. And the 6-layer architecture. On the top is how, on the left, left and right is war, right? The spirit of war is driving force behind it, right? But what are the 6 layers it described? But also there is a non-palace model, right? Which also described previously, right? So that's where there's some terminology I have to build up the connection, the bridge for you to understand it. Like, that's where macro brain comes out, macro heart based on macro minors come out, right? Macro meridians, right? The reason why I call it macro, because my company's name, right? Maicrobotix, right? So that's my brand, right? Trademark, right? Legally protected. So the real thing that I'm creating is a macro banker, macro doctor, or macro lawyer for different domains. But they enabled macro heart, macro brain, right? But down to the business part, you have to have the macro SQL, macro API, and macro runtime, macro login, right? This kind of essential. MaicroStudio is the tool that I build using AI and robotics, and I use this tool to build these products as well, right? MacroQ is also another technology, simply to decouple, right? To facilitate like agentic framework, right? Talking about agentic framework, as I say, SAFE is what I propose. Stands for sovereignty, or sovereign simply, agentic AI framework, right? If you think about, depends on where you're from. If you have kind of growing through the past couple of decades. You know what Unix is, Linux, right? They have a bash, right, shell. But what Anthropic and others proposing, a CLI whatsoever, nothing more than a bash script, right? Everything is a file. You can pipeline everything, right? But that's really a very primitive form of agentic, right? Although they give it a lot of branding names, make it sound like so sophisticated, but down to earth, they're very simple, right? That's not what a real agentic AI is supposed to be, right? So in my line of products, which I call it, MaicroStudio, where you're able to create micro agent, you start with ingest bottled intelligence, which I call it macro brain, right? Essentially, you need to build your own model. I call it domain-specific multimodal model, right? Domain-specific. And then you need to add business ontology. Right? That's together formulating the operating system, like Linux, Unix, Windows, Mac OS, or Android, whatever, right? Or the Huawei Harmonious, right? Harmony OS, right? And AI served that purpose, right? And it need a runtime. They need a little OS or kernel in it, right? When I proposed the macro runtime, that's what it is, right? Thinking of the containerization, but in this case, if it is a device, AI device, like, a glass, right? You need a little small model, okay? You cannot just rely on the cloud, right? It has to be localized. That's what the private operating system is, right? What glass is really for, right? You cannot run the same large language model on the cloud for your pharmaceuticals. No, that's not even applicable, right? That's why you need private, localized AI, okay, agent, right? There could be a couple of little agents running your glass, right? AI glasses or AI watch, doesn't matter, right? A lot of devices are going to come out, right? In an agentic world, in an enterprise, if you try simply just, monitor the transactions of the crypto payment, right? Of course, you need to understand blockchain. That's the language it speaks, protocol, right? Interoperability. How are you going to do that business? That is the ontology, right? You need a very different model there, okay? You don't need to write a lot of reports, do you? Okay, you need to monitor. But when you try to explain that, then you need to understand what's cryptography, of course, right? How the machine learning, how the data bias, right? How the decisions are made. You need to explain, right? You have to find evidence. It is not probabilistic anymore. It had to find logical retrieval, right? You have to use some sort of, knowledge base, on top of your business ontology, the RAG, You might need to call, over the internet some OpenAI model. But by and large, you should localize it, make it private, domain specific, right? That only your data will be totally within your network, using your own AI, right? I mean, in a nutshell, that's what I propose, right? Now, let's work through, right, how really, get it done, right? How we do it. Again, I'm taking the financials, like a big bank, for example. The Bank of Bank of New York, HSBC, Citibank, JP Morgan, right? They all done it, right? It's no longer a secret, but done it for the new line of businesses, not try to rewrite COBOL, right? It's kind of silly, right? So the global financial service, right, is currently navigating a profound, I would say, paradigm shift, right? It is primarily driven by maturity of, namely like stable coins, right? Kind of blockchain-based, the new currency, cryptocurrency, crypto payment, right? And also the advanced artificial intelligence, large language model is more or less mature, right? It's no longer, it's proven. It's no longer that you have to, cut people by surprise. No surprise anymore, right? You can make it better, right? But you're not going to hardly come out with any surprise, right? So we are marching towards the kind of relatively fully autonomous, agentic kind of systems, right? We're capable using the AI agent to execute multi-steps workflows, right? Think about it, more like a person, right? Now it's an agent. My term called agentic AI, kind of frameworks for a reason, right? It's like we have to function within a regulated framework. We have to have our identity. We have to have particular permission to do the jobs we're allowed to do, right? Same thing with the AI agent, right? It also has to function within a framework, right? It might acquire a true entity that in your corporate, system, right? Give it a role, give it a permission, give it some privilege, right? Even give it account, right? Because you need it to transfer some money, right? Think about it. It's a totally new business model, right? The top tier financial institutions, as I mentioned, fail, right? Each and every one of them has built a vast, highly fragmented legacy infrastructure, like from mainframe to ERP to the digitized digital microservice and so on and so forth, right? It is silly to rewrite those systems. That's not what AI is supposed to do, right? Now, they all need to adopting the enterprise agentic AI as a new transitional force, right? It is no longer speculation, right? It's no longer any sort of blue moon kind of innovation. It becomes very immediate structural necessity in a way, right? They need it. Everybody needs it, right? Especially through the year of 2024, 2025, it's proven, right? So those leading institutions, right, each of them have developed agentic framework. A lot of failures, lessons for sure, right? And some banks, give awards based on how many agents you created. That's clearly it's not a good strategy, right? More agents doesn't mean it's more efficient, right? It doesn't give you better ROI, right? Probably create more chaos, cost you more, right? More risks, right? So in automating the mission critical, like middle office, risk management, or back office, the operations, right? They have been demonstrating unprecedented efficiency, right? A lot of gain, right? Cutting costs for sure, right? In finance, reconciliation is a big one, right? You treat finance, how you make sure that process is intact, right? You can monitor everything. You have to, the email, KYC. Soon it will be, people are just using the jargon, right? KYC, KYB, and now KYA. What is that? Know your agent, right? And previously rely on a lot of the external API calls through the SaaS era, right? But now you could use agent, right? To further decouple that thing and integrate only when they need, become much more flexible, right? Think about it. If you deep down into the enterprise architecture, that's critical, right? A lot of touch points, right? Each of them has to be clicking in the right moment for the right duration, and a lot of retries, a lot of risks to roll back, roll forward. think about it. Now agent come in, all that complexity become very easily managed. That's what the power is, right? But all those agents has to run in a safe framework that I build, right? I call it sovereign agentic AI framework, right? Safe, right? Okay, that's essential, right? Safe in a way not only monitored, governed, right? Efficiently kind of deployed and executed, but also you have full traceability, right? You have full explainability, right? You can at every moment to instruct them to do differently, right? That's where the AI kind of capacity really come to the full power, right? Okay, it's no longer just the tool, it's more like a partner and a collaborator, right? But again, eventually it's the human worker that's going to be taking accountability, therefore has to have the power to supervise, right? To supersede the execution as well, even at runtime. How do you enable that? That's what the sovereign agentic AI framework is going to give you, right? Real-time compliance monitoring is built in, right? For example, in complex client onboarding, right? You have to screen the all sorts of list, PEP, sanction, whether we can do banking with it or not, right? At the same time, you have to collect the ID, all sorts of critical data elements, because it's part of the regulation, right? Sometimes have to enhance the KYC part, right? You have to ask for additional information, get more identification, make sure who is the actual owner, who is the beneficiary, right? What product you are try to subscribe to, what are sort of the terms and conditions you have to enforce, and at the same time what regulatory compliance. Some forms has to be signed, right? Signature has to be obtained before even you can commit the funding, right? Fulfill that thing, right? Those are the complexity, right? Agent is more like a worker, right? Doesn't matter you go to a branch or you talk over the telephone or you call the call center, right? Same thing here, right? Just AI and robotics, a new way of doing banking, right? It's not trying to fixing the old problems. It's a new business model, right? That's the power. Now, simultaneously, however, right, institutional financial landscape is also expanding. As I said, that's the major force, tokenization, like JP Morgan, right? So that's the real digital asset, right? The tokenization of real-world asset RWA, such as the real estate, private equity, and physical commodity, and more, right? And total equity, right? The integration of cryptocurrency payment, the new rails of money movement represent a massive growth opportunity, right? That's what I encourage each and every bank to rethink their strategy, right? Not to fix the old ERP problem or rewrite COBOL, that's silly, right? Thinking of a new business opportunity, right? Eventually you may just strangle slowly your old systems, okay? Not try to rebuild them because you may not even need them, right? You understand that? And building a new system using AI is better than fixing old garbage, right? I wouldn't say the business garbage, but the code, a lot of accumulated, really archaic, right, kind of code. In a mainframe world, you have GCL, so many batch jobs in the middle tier. How do you fix it, right? So what is the destiny going to be rewritten, right? The trails be rejustified, kick off the right batch job in the right time, sending to whoever the other, 100 more old systems. Yeah, you can rediscover that, even if you recreate everything. So what do you gain? More efficiency? Cheaper? Not necessarily, but more risks for sure, right? Even if you done it with zero risk, but again, what do you gain? You achieve nothing, right? The best you can make equal. So what is your return on investment? It's more or less negative, right? Or more or less guaranteed, negative, right? So turn to the new business opportunities. There are plenty. There are huge market share, $1 trillion markets, right? Why don't you, right? Of course, right? You can complain, you can fight, a lot of frictions, right? A lot of, emotions there, but business is business, right? Make money, make profit, grow the business is probably the overriding, purpose, right? You should give it a high priority, right? And this kind of business opportunity takes a new thinking, right? There has to be sort of a little more governed, right? That some of the frameworks like clarity and so on and so forth still in a debate, right? And especially global kind of the landscape, a lot of uncertainty. But doesn't give you the excuse not to do, right? To stay in the comfort zone. You have to go. You have to be part of the evolution, be part of the change, right? Yes, there are risks, but it's no risks totally safe. There's no profit either, right? You'll be soon when you realize everything's safe. It's too late, right? You've been left behind, right? So, think about the Genius was, I think, July 2025, and Clarity, beginning of the year, got into a quagmire. But eventually it will, in some shape or form, the stablecoin issues, right? I think the argument they want to be explicitly subjected to the Banking Secrecy Act, right? They have to subject to the AML, KYC, right? So many regulations, and the consumer protection, right? The comprehensive risk assessment has to go through, right? As I said, right? The technology capability is one thing, right? The operational governance, right? That security kind of that has to be there, right? You cannot say we want to totally decentralize. That's silly, right? You have to give the regulator, the government, some power to oversee, and if required, if merited, right? They should give in the power to, in terms of the cryptocurrency or RWA, they have monitor that. They're probably able to seize it and freeze it and burn some, whatever, the lawful activities, right? By court order, right? The convergence of these chaotic legacy data silos, right? And intricate business processes, kind of, it's a necessity, but again, we need to streamline those, right? So many regulatory compliance, in a way, it's a daunting task, right? How do you use AI to simplify that? Probably not, right? You have to create new regulations, right? You have to make some old regulations obsolete, right? Because it's hard to govern the new reals of cryptocurrency, movement, the transaction, right? But of course, the relics is always unyielding, right? They has been the best for a long time. We tell them now it's irrelevant. No, they're not going to yield, right? That's for sure. Traditional automation tools, of course, like some of the old bots, right? Some even screen scraping kind of been there for a while. Untangle that takes a while. The best way to strangle it, right? Gradually, create a new, marching forward. If you need, you trickle in, right? Bit by bit, to strangle them, right? Don't invest in more, but don't try to redo that either, right? Moving forward, marching forward aggressively, right? that eventually you need to realize AI and robotics needs a new financial ecosystem. Be part of it. Okay, don't pick up the fight. I need to solve the old problems like you processing garbage, right? It's not a lot of glory there, right? Even you process all the garbage, so what? Is there any revenue there? No, right? Because you're solving the obsolete problem, right? So that's the first danger or risk that I warn some of my clients, right? So the probabilistic kind of logic and deterministic kind of logic, right? It's in a dance, right? You have to find a way to bridge it. That's why I propose the strangling. Use agent. Agents can be two a partner. One is dealing with the old world, the other dealing with the new world, right? That's what the flexibility of agent. Right? You don't have to have, asynchronous logic interleaving kind of large programs to manage that, right? Just agent will do that. Think about it. That's the power of AI, agentic AI, right? It's very sophisticated and simple, right? You can also put a human in a loop, right? Think about it. How much more you can expect, right? It's mitigate the risk almost perfectly, right? So it's real time as well, right? The consequences, however, you need to deploy the enterprise agentic AI. It must be a full cycle, like planning, reasoning, executing, right? The complex workflows, right? The governing, afterwards, supporting, right? You have to be some canary test there to be able to switch, able to explain, to retrain the models, right? That's why I propose you have to build your own private operating system, including the multimodal domain-specific models, plus your business ontology. Of course, under the supervision of this safe, right? Sovereign agentic AI framework is what I propose, right? Now, watch out the words AI native, right? Means a lot to different people, right? AI native is something like, if you build a script, shell script for Unix, right? Now, you want to build an agentic workflow on top of the private OS operating system, which is AI, agentic AI, whatever you name it, different models, right? Business ontology. That's what I call private operating system. Let's say you're writing a little AI agent. It's nothing more than like a scripting, a shell script, and an old Unix, right, if you will, or DCL on the mainframe, right? It does the job, right? That's what the new agent is about, right? It's pretty simple technologically, right? Don't mystify it, right? Also, don't oversimplify it, right? You think DCL is difficult, it's simple, but you write one for me, right? Can you? You have to understand the technology, right? You have to understand the underlying ZOS, right? Right? So you think a cron job is easy, you write one for me, right? Okay. Well, you build an entire master database, you build entire ERP systems, you can run on Unix, right? You could build a very sophisticated agentic AI system like that, right? There can be hundreds of thousands of agents collectively doing some very complex financial transactions, like what I proposed, the broker channel, right? A new ATM, right? A market, new capital market, right? It's upcoming. It's coming up, right? Those are three lines of business, the products, and more than one, obviously, in each of the line of business, right? That I'm building, okay? At least I can guarantee my clients will get good revenue, good return on investment, right? Because those are new business opportunities, right? It is AI native, right? And without AI, it's impossible to do it. Do it efficiently and cost effectively, right? Securely, right? You see, that is where, you know, you have to interact with the mainframe, interact with ERPs and combine together distributed ledger, smart contracts, right? Interoperability between these blockchains, of course, right? But agents, it's almost a natural fit into those scenarios. Without the agentic AI, it's not possible at all, right? I mean, not feasible, okay, technologically and financially, right? It is a paramount strategic innovation. It's not mine, but you know, the community. It is kind of imperative for me to advise my clients, right? You need to have a more strategic view, have to have institutional modernization roadmap, right? Like last time we do digital transformation, I've been leading that for 10 years or so. I know how hard it is, right? Still many banks and many large businesses falling behind that. They cannot even manage the data, right? No data, no AI, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Very simple to understand, right? You cannot magically expect a language model out of these mountains of garbage and give you correct probability predictions, right? It's impossible. It will glorify your errors, you know, convince you that you are doing the right thing, even if you're totally wrong, right? That's what AI can amplify, okay? So we're gonna dive into deeper, right? So bear with me. I'm going to talk through without visuals, right? So you might need to come back and listen again, or use whatever AI tools to analyze and simplify. It's okay, right? But we're going to come revisit many of those concepts, right? A second fundamental question is, what the open AI, I try to stay away from, because OpenAI is a closed AI, right? OpenAI is Sam Altman, that company, you know, Elon Musk swinging that, right? They used to be representing the open source, but now they're closed, right? Unfortunately. And Anthropic is growing out of it. It's also the same evil brother, right? Evil twin, same closed AI. Oh, sorry to use that word. That doesn't mean you're really evil. Just the closed AI that I don't really like a lot, right? But again, you have a lot of advanced technology, good products that give you kudos for that, right? But when I advise my clients, like large banks, for example, or hospitals, right? So the fundamental question is, yeah, I need to build up my AI capacity, like platform, and you want us to build up the private OS encompassing the multimodal AI models, obviously including large language model, doesn't matter if it's open source or closed source, but the question is, should I build it upon open source, like, you know, the Queen model, like from Alibaba, the DeepSeek model, right? Or JLM model for, you know, coding, and some other agentic framework for Minimax, or Mistral, or many other open source from the States, right? Or I use closed AI like Anthropic, OpenAI, or Google, or Meta is going to soon propose that now it's focusing on small business, but soon going to get into a large enterprise. Of course, Elon Musk, XAI try to gain some footprint, and even NVIDIA proposed a lot of models, right? You know, Nemo, whatever that is, right? Just APIs or small programs, AI models, right? There are a lot, right? So essentially, if you simplify that, should I build my AI foundation on top of open source AI or closed AI? That's the fundamental question, right? Well, to answer those questions, you have to understand what are the pros and cons, strengths and capacities, right? What is the rationale behind it, right? What are the failures and, you know, misses and of course the risks, regulatory concerns, right? The sanctions, right? It's a wall, right? Each can have a game to play, right? Strategically, right? So if you look at the technological foundation, right, it's quite intricate, right? And intertwined with the global geopolitics. The latest Iran strike illustrates that, right? And it's not simply just a technology. It has long-tailed implications, consequences, whatever steps you take, right? You have to be really thinking it over, right? And if you want to select a vendor, select a technology to build up your stack, you better go through rigorous processes, right? What I'm going to talking through is what I propose you to think through. Right? I'm not really give you a silver bullet and this is the right answer or wrong answer. Give you a way to frame your thoughts, to give you a framework to make your decisions. That's all I'm trying to do, right? First of all, look at the vendors and the capability, pros and cons, strengths and weakness. So if you look at it, right, back in 2025, the DeepSeek kind of disrupted the global technology sector by releasing the model, right? That exceeded the performance. By this year, it already exceeded, right? Maybe some of the benchmarks are not so precise, but essentially it's no longer a question, right? The open source model able to match and even exceed the capacity of closed AI models, like from OpenAI, Anthropic or Google, you name it, right? So they're on par, right? If not saying that who is good, who is bad, right? But what is different is that the cost, right? And the risk. So what do you mean by that, right? Training is already kind of be shouldered by the vendors, but the inference you have to pay, right? The inference cost, what DeepSeek, if you look at the numbers, I think $0.55 versus like $15 from OpenAI. How many times? 70 times? I don't know. Like you calculate, you do the math, right? It's much, much cheaper. 70 times or more, 100 times, doesn't matter how you calculate, cheaper. So if you think about it, you're in a large bank, you need AI, embrace it fully, do financials, transactions, payment, cryptography, asset tokenization, manage customer onboarding, monitor everything. How many tokens you need to consume per day? 1 million? 1 billion? If you multiply that difference on a monthly expenditure, if you look at this balance sheet, you're going to see if you use OpenAI and versus DeepSeek, you spend like 10 million more on tokens alone, right? Or more, right? If you recall, in the digital transformation era, I think I advised my clients that getting onto the cloud, doesn't matter how you get it there, don't fall into trap you think cloud is cheaper. Not necessarily. You might have to pay, what sub by your data center, now you have to pay 30 million more per month for cloud using the whatever features, right? Product, services, right? You're just shifting from OPEX to CAPEX, right? Or vice versa. Doesn't mean it's cheaper, right? So that is the first trap. The risks, right? If you think about it, right? If you using Queen 3.5 or upcoming the DeepSeek 4.0, then you essentially own it, right? You copy and paste, modify that, it's yours, right? You don't pay for that model, right? You may pay for a bit of consulting, right? That's it. I don't know, a couple thousand, maybe 100,000, that's it, right? But you need a little small team, right, to manage that. Maybe me, I can build it up for you, right? Deploy it and monitor it. Make sure that train a couple people there, you can monitor it and develop it, evolve it, right? That's yours, right? And the inference is much cheaper. The risk is gone because you run that model that you build, you own. It's yours within your framework, right? Within your network, within your enterprise protected zone, right? Literally no risk because no data is going out of your your securitized zone, right? Versus if you use OpenAI, right? They come to next release and you call the API or whatever, right? How do you know that how they use your data? A lot of risks, right? Because your data need to fly to their model, right? But you say, no, I want to deploy the OpenAI model in my network as well. Again, they are closed AI. They are not going to show you what the internal parameters, ways, and source code, for example, if you understand what software is about. But then how do you know that how they use your data? Can you guarantee they don't use your enterprise IP protected data and business process and customer experience, all that kind of stuff to train their model and sell it to next client? And especially in the upgrade from OpenAI 4.0 to 5.0 or to 5.2, whatever, or 6.0. Essentially, you're paying them to use your data to train their model and sell it for a better price to you, right? To others as well. Oh, it's not about money, it's about risks, right? How do you know they use your data, right? How do you know they don't expose your, subject you to regulatory fines later on, right? Any leakage there in the customer data whatsoever, your corporate secret is gone, right? Unless, you pay like 16 billion, like DP Market dies, totally like buying some versions of OpenAI, build it, right? Totally, right? Crack the internals, right? Mobilize, 2,000 experts there. But that first of all, you have to invest how many billions, right? How many banks have those kind of budget, right? Of course, right? The OpenAI and Anthropic and Google eventually going to come up with a strategy. They might release some open source models for you to use, right? But again, open source AI is the way to go, right? If you want to build up your multimodal kind of models, including language model or VLA model or voice model, whatever that is, right? And plus business ontology. By the way, right, business ontology, you have to build it yourself, right? You cannot just buy it. Your business, you know it, right? The policies, the governance, the whatever constitution within your company, with your business, regulatory compliance, right? You know that better than anybody else. And it's yours, right? You not even want to buy from anybody. If you do that, you have to expose your corporate secrecy, right? IPs and everything to others, right? Allow them to build it and use it, right? Again, how do you know that's safe? A lot of risks, right? So just by simple, there's like anatomy, a comparison of open source AI versus closed AI. It is obvious to me the way to go is have to find a way to make it private, that you own it. You run that whatever language model within your enterprise of corporate networks, right? Only necessary. You use agent, you use some sort of framework to govern, to air gap kind of transitional gateway, right? You call it AI gateway or something like that, to reach out to the API through the closed AI models, right? You don't get non-essential tasks, essentially, right? So whatever is important, critically, imperatively, you have to run it within your own hand. That's what I'm proposing, right? I think it is simple, right? But again, I might need to improve my my way of communicating. Hopefully you get the point, right? So my proposal, in a way, probably going to trigger a lot of anger from the closed AI community, right? The reason being, Anthropic and OpenAI already claim that, accusing the Minimax, Moonshot, DeepSeek, executing some industrial scale kind of distillation, but they forgot to mention that distillation is the standard AI and machine learning training technique. It is a standard one. They're also using it. That's why I mentioned this kind of hypocrisy, right? But again, they speak louder, right? And they using better words, although they're quite vapid, but sound better, right? But if you look beyond that, you dig deeper, you see what are the real risks, why they're saying that. Protect their own interest, business interest, right? They want more money, higher profit margin, right? Charge you more. Given the open source AI, they're not able to charge too much, right? That's why OpenAI is in trouble, right? For a good reason. It is credit to the open source AI community, collectively, globally. If you think about it, by MIT report of the Silicon Valley, not a lot of statistics, right? 70-80% worldwide, including United States, using that Queen or GLM or DeepSeek open source models already, right? Even Europe, right, as well. And Mistral, they have it, but why the open source community is still embracing the Chinese model? Because they have more variety, they're cheaper, right? And Mistral not entirely open, right? They claim sovereign stuff, building a lot of customized stuff, right? You don't want to dance with, right? Those are bondages as well, right? It's open source plus and bondages, right? But again, already, DeepSeek and some others being sanctioned, right? You cannot use in whichever scenario, like military or government related, right? Again, it's protect, right? Of course, the Sam Altman and Anthropic, these people are going to lobby the government to enforce even harder, stringent, sanctions against the open source community, not only Chinese AI, right? AI, open source AI from China, but everybody. Why? Because they want a better, more advantageous AI regulations, right? Environment, so that they can set the standards, charge more, monopolize, right? But again, thinking from AI robotics as a whole, that's quite counterproductive to the overall advancement of the technology, isn't it, right? So, at the same time, right, the lobbying effort is quite intensified, right, in Washington. They want to penalize the open source AI community, citing whatever cyber warfare risks, legislative pushes, some paid-off act and the Revoke Act. You know what it is, right? Alongside the executive orders, right, aimed at eliminating state-level, obstruction to national AI dominance, right? Highlight is a concerted effort to preserve the American technological supremacy, democratize the AI, protect the American businesses. Yeah, there's some good nuggets in that kind of rhetoric, but mostly, by far, most, they're just for profit, right? Make sure they have better profit margin, that's all, right? Of course, they want export controls, regulatory blocks, right? So, banking, for example, right, tightly, heavily regulated, especially in North America, right? These geopolitical concerns and tensions, though they are pretty, for profit, but you have to take notice, right? If you're a large bank, you don't want to get into that, tomorrow maybe like DeepSeek may be sanctioned, right? You don't want to risk that, right? Even today is okay, but tomorrow, who knows, right? But how are we going to do it in a way that aligned and compliant with the regulations and also reap the profit of open source AI long term? That's what I propose. Build your own. You could copy, paste, and build, right? Don't fine tune. Build it, right? I think from this book, okay? I don't know if you see it, right? But I read it for you. Like from the physicist Richard Feynman, right? Feynman reportedly saying that I don't understand anything I can't build, right? You really have to build it, right? Oh, I'm saying that building a large language model is no longer a challenge, right? But again, building one for yourself, it is still a challenge, right? That is why maybe you engage a small boutique firm like I am running, right? It's better, more economic, because I could build it with my bare hand for you, right? Especially for you. Okay, all the risk on me, right? Just give you what you need, and also build up the business ontology if you want me to, right? All within your in-house, right? Maybe in a fraction of the cost that if you go with a large consulting firm or open AI or Google, right? Think about it. You tell me what is the result. You can test it and use it, right? It's like a partnership, right? That's what a small company like mine is for, right? Of course, I want to grow big, but when I was small, I have to make it more cost effective. I do have to have some skills, that asset to share with you as well, right? If you want to pay the purchase, my product is also way more economic, right? Cost effective, right? Solve the problem as well, right? And pivot your business model towards the new opportunity, as I've been mentioning, right? So those are a bit of commercial that will come back, right? So essentially relying on the open source model is a risk. So the solution is to build your own. I can build it for you, and many other really capable consultants or consulting firms can also build it for you, right? Okay, so the polarization, right, of the ecosystem is pervading not only North America but Europe and other part of the country, right? Mistral, right, they try to cut the middle ground. They got the 109 billion euros from the French AI infrastructure, which is government, right, and initiative, and heavily backed by Esmail in Holland, right? You know what is the chip designer, right? Mistral position is a pro-solving kind of alternative. That's a good move, I'd say that, right? HSBC partners with Mistral, okay? Build one for them to use, right? That's a good example that what I propose, right? I also have my AI, also not so famous, but again, as brilliant as DeepSeek, as brilliant as Mistral, but not too much below the bar of whatever who claim the latest model, doesn't matter OpenAI or Mistral, right? Okay, because that is already the old story, no longer a challenge there. You throw in some millions, you could build it, right? Some universities already demonstrated you could build a model way cheaper than me, right? So now, I think we more or less nailed the second question, right? The proposal is, build your own private, right? Run it secure, right? Solve the problem, data leakage, the privacy steps. So let's go through my 6-layer business architecture and see, can we pin down some of the questions probably still floating in your bank, doesn't matter, executives, the leaders of technical experts, right? So I mentioned the agentic AI, solving agentic AI kind of framework. So what do I mean by that? By far, it is just architectural framework, right? So that's what I recommend for the enterprise AI modernization. Okay, I'll put it in the perspective of the 6-layer business architecture, right? Beginning the foundation level, which is the elements of energy. What do I mean by that? I mean, this layer, I just speak out of my mind, represents the fundamental scientific breakthrough in algorithm, data compression, if you will, and cryptography, primitive to power advanced agentic systems. That's all it is. It is science, algorithmics, right? Cryptography. Recent algorithmic kind of innovation, if you will, are fundamentally altering how financial institutions can process vast truths of unstructured data in a big data era. If you remember the 5 V's: velocity, volume, variation, all kind of stuff. DeepSeek, for example, demonstrated the scientific prowess, introducing revolutionary models such as the OCR, DeepSeek OCR. What it is, it redefines visual text, right? Compression, right? So traditionally, the multimodal AI model requires massive token expenditure to interpret images of documents, right? And there are many banks, right? PDF files, handwriting notes, right? Trading, all kind of books, right? Payment trails, right? Of course, the reports, all kind of mainframe or ERP, they all generate kind of reports, right? Logs everywhere, right? Security, runtime errors, right? So on and so forth, right? So if you use the closed AI, it costs you through the roof, because there will be millions, trillions tokens, right, every day you're going to spend. You're not able to. So DeepSeek, for the banking institution, how they manage the mountains of handwritten artifacts, scan legal documents, PDFs, KYC documents, the customer consent, and the scientific breakthrough is what I mean, OCR, right? They have many of those stuff, right? That's why the true innovator is the open source community. But again, the closed AI is copied for free, right? Without even send a thanks note, right? But they in turn villainize the open source community. That's kind of insane, right? But it's beyond art, right? And accuse them, espionage and stealing legislation, whatever that is, right? But at the same time, they're doing the same. That's what we call hypocrisy, like Elon Musk put it, right? Squarely, right? But in any case, so then what I mean is a small example. This breakthrough implies the entire archive can be ingested and processed within a single context window, which is the few tokens. Way more economically viable, right? Way more prone to kind of scale up, right? And sustainable, right? Think about it. That's not only low risk, but scale, sustainability, resilience, all part and parcel of the what we call enterprise AI architecture, right? Remember, we're talking about safe, right? What is safe, right? Risk is number one, right? Sustainability, right? So simultaneously, the energy I mentioned, right, component of the layer that I call it layer 1 encompasses the advanced cryptography science necessary to secure the autonomous AI agent, right? Think about it. As agentic systems gain its popularity, some authentication and authorization, it's like authority to independently execute crypto payments, for example, has to be given, right? And that's where it's required to tokenize the real world asset or financial asset. Doesn't matter, right? They become the high value kind of targets for cyber adversaries, right? Because it's high value, right? If you use the closed AI, how do you manage that risk? I don't know. There's no answer yet, right? So by 2026, the transition to post-quantum cryptography is no longer theoretical. It is implemented, right? It is operationalized to some extent. Okay, it becomes a mandate by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, right? And the commercial side national security algorithm kind of suite, CNSA 2.0 if you be specific. It is on the timeline, on the radar, on the plan, right? So do you think that who's going to be there first? I bet it's going to be the open source, AI part, because there are many innovators eager to see such an opportunity. They're going to go there first, right? And they offer it for free because they need some branding, right? They need some attention. Again, soon will be copied by the closed AI. Then they're probably going to accuse the true innovators of, thieves, right? That's the game to play. But I think everybody very soon is going to know that, right? You know what is cryptocurrency, right? If quantum computing comes, what's the implication, right? Some of the presumed security or guarantee is gone, right? So what do you do, right? So you need quantum safe certification, right? To ensure that whatever crypto identity verification is authenticated there to prevent the raw, compromised kind of agents, right? Everybody can build agents. The adversaries outside your bank also build agents and pretend to be one of your agents, right? So that infiltration, that financial workflow, man in the middle, all sorts of attacks, right? You're going to see new ways to attack the banks, right? So that is where you need real innovation. That is where the open source community, by and large, are going to be there first, right? Maybe some of the very small startups, maybe some just individuals, but essentially you need to be really pro-spirit. The partner with me, for example, that shield away from many of these complexities. At the same time, we're not going to lock into Anthropic or OpenAI, waiting for them to copy from the OpenAI community, open source AI community, and then give you a year later. Right? By then, it's too late, right? You probably lost already $1 billion, right? Crime has been committed, right? Loss has been real on the headlines, right? Your reputation is gone, right? So, of course, this is just kind of half-heartedly kidding, right? Joking, but again, think about it yourself. I'm not making decisions for you, right? The integration, the advanced data compression algorithm with the post-quantum certification cryptography primitives, it is going to be quite significant, right? That is where, if you kind of embracing the open source AI part, you have a better leverage, or probably a better bet to mitigate these kind of risks, right? So, second tier or layer above the elements and energy is the infrastructure, right? Technology part. What do we mean by that? If you think like a lift, what I mean lift, the law, industrialization and finance and transport. On the right is workforce, arms, and risks, right? If you're ascending from the bottom layer, which is energy and elements, now we come into the second floor, if you will, right? So in my design, the bottom layer is really the basement. Now we come the ground. Now we're first time seeing this, right? Everything else is visible. It's the foundation part. Now we come to the ground floor, which is called layer 2. If you got it. It's like in Britain, when I used to be, they have ground floor, right? And then, doesn't matter. I give you layer 2 is the ground floor, right? Infrastructure and information technology. Now, the infrastructure and information focus on the shapes to the fundamental technology stack required to house, structure, index, and retrieve enterprise data securely, right? And AI models, right? Doesn't matter what you use, you have to house it somewhere, maybe a registry, right? Maybe some sort of other, kind of directory, right? Regardless of the parameter size, right? They're only effectively some sort of binary, one kind of data, right? So modernizing top-tier bank like yours require transitioning away from the siloed, brittle kind of data architecture. I used to do this data architecture more than 10 years, right? Building, data warehouse, sophisticated database for customers, for regulations, and also build master data hubs, right? And also data lakes, you name it, right? The foundational data model. That's why I have the capability to build a business ontology. Business ontology includes all of this data, right? It's not something new. It's pretty extension of that, right? Plus the financial data exchange for the open banking, the BAN model for the different exchange of APIs, if you name. A lot of things at play, the business models, terminology, semantic layer, is all part and parcel with the business ontology, right? But for new line of business, not try to revolutionize about the whole ocean, right? It's not required, and it's impractical. The ROI there is too low, right? It's not justified, right? Now, what you need to do critically is to make sure you could build a data that serve as enterprise knowledge, right? Whatever that tools, right? To enable that the retrieval augmented generation RAG, if you will, the pipelines, right? Use the agentic framework to do that, right? Enabling the language model to query proprietary enterprise data with semantic precision, right? Vectors, right? You have to know that. Like universe, right? I'm not getting a lot of jargon, but I assume you feature stores, right? Then that is where you build up the vendor kind of specific, whatever the model like mine or yours, right? Doesn't matter. You have to build associated to make it robust and scalable, right? So just to think about a vector kind of database, right? You have a lot of choices, right? I would really see, for lack of a better one, just using PostgreSQL maybe can solve your problem, right? But okay, Milverse, right? Quadrant, and Databricks. Databricks is a good one. They have unified lakehouse, right? Architect and data engineering, right? Snowflakes, right? It's another one. It's good. Blockchain X, right? There are a lot of choices, like RWE, especially the tokenization platform. I have my own, right? So if you will, I can also do a demo to you, right? Especially, I call it ATM, right? With the asset token machine management, right? It's comparable to what I listed here, right? Especially for the tokenized asset, financial asset, right? My focus is financial part first, like ATM, right? For over-the-counter kind of tokenization for real estate and whole financial asset as well, and crypto payments for sure, right? So you standardize all those communication protocols between the vast data repository, right? Make sure you have a new protocol for the agent to that's one thing that's lacking, right? For now, I don't see a good one yet, right? I try to propose one, but probably I have to think through a bit more, right? So the model context protocol, the skills from Anthropic is all pretty impressive, right? But again, there are limitations there, right? When they combine with the sort of enterprise-grade tokenization platforms, like BlockX, right? We're going to facilitate cross-chain interoperability. That's what it is. If you think about the JP Morgan versus BlackRock and HSBC, they use different blockchains, right? Some are private, some are enterprise. You have to become a member, but essentially you have to integrate the public if you want to facilitate payments globally, right? Like Singapore, Middle East, all propose different, like a MiCA from Europe, right? So that is where we talk about technology, right? Data especially, right? You need those as a foundation, right? That's what we mean by infrastructure, okay? And then if you elevate a little more, right, ascending to the third layer, right, that's what I mean by that nine palace kind of model, showing you how to build it up, right? I know it, you know, close my eyes, I know it, right? It's pretty simple. It's I Ching architecture, right? Nine palace, right? The numbers is not like as you thinking, it's more close to nature from the astronomy, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? That's how it goes, right? So I'm going to simplify it for you, right? Situate it conceptually between the foundation technology layer above that layer 2, right? And the computing and application layer, which layer 3 through to 6, is the sophisticated operational matrix. I call it nine palace model, right? That encompasses 3, 4, probably 5, if you will, right? What it is really derived from the classic I Ching mathematical model, right? So it's like DNA model, double helix kind of flow structure serves as the internal operating paradigm for enterprise development. That's totally mine, right? So my product and technology is proposed based on this architecture, right? It organized the complex business architecture, functions, and technology development integrated into a cohesive and continuously evolving ecosystem. That's the advantage. In military, that's what we use. In science, obviously, it's what we use. I mean, science not in a way that modern science, but traditionally, right? For large banks, I use it because it's proven to be safer, right? At least to give you a more grounded, tested model to use. By the way, you don't need to do it. I will do it for you, right? So I'll explain to you how I did it. It's fully transparent, right? So what it is categorize the technology business functions sequentially and also in an iterative way, interdisciplinarily, continuously flow and evolve, adapt and grow, right? So it is secure framework in nature, right? And how you build it, right? So if I made this quickly, in a one part is more like MaicroSQL, right? We have a lot of data, right? Your business ontology is arising from there, right? But that's where the door concept is coming, right? More security, right? You have to be able to, whoever comes to the door of your bank, right? Any other systems, a mini door, if you will, the boundary, right? It's not a firewall, but it's a secure function to authenticate you, authorize you, make sure that only authorized access, in and out, okay? Like, this is how you're going to make sure the post-quantum identity access is ensured, right? By design, zero tolerance, by design, security, right? That's how you get it, right? Synthetic identities in this AI agent era is also subject to this kind of micro door way. As long as you enter the door, doesn't matter you're a person or an entity, a dog, doesn't matter, right? Or a process or an API call, right? Some sort of gateway, if you will, right? Then the second is obviously macro API. API meaning like you could using code generation. You don't have to write it by hand anymore. The MaicroSQL implicates you have to tame the base of data, right? Right, enterprise data, right? Essentially, just another form of integrate the whole enterprise data, okay? With the lake or without the lake. I mean, it's a product. It's nothing really mysterious, just like a SQL engine. If you think about PySpark, right? Databricks technology. This is my technology in a way, right? They use different techniques, right? Macro API combined with the payment part, I call it post, right? inclusive payment, right? You know, the like payment operational for sales, for transport, right? Transport in a way asset is included, right? You have to get on a SPV, you know, special purpose vehicle, if you understand it. Not only the smart contract, right? Because tokens has to travel, right? All the digital, but they still have to travel, right? From one wallet to another, from one chain to another. That's physical. It's not just the data, right? And you know, that's the concept of MaicroBotix, right? Like you know, you deliver something, right? Not only transaction, not only data, but physically, what is the token, right? Who is the ownership? Who has the right to use? You know, it flows from the chain into the different ledgers, distributed, right? So that is where the execution of the crypto payment is like stablecoin transactions, right? You have to comply and monitor the compliance of Genius Act, Clarity Act, tracking the life cycle, you know, of the physical asset traveling through, you know, different treasury, you know, wallets and ledgers, right? 3 is macro login, right? That is where you have to open up to other partners, right? And when it comes to, you think about it, the 2 or 3 layers entity you need to deal with, right? You might need some broker, you might be totally blockchain, right? It's thinking of the new channel for the bank. That's why I call it micro channel, right? It's an omni-channel customer engagement, replicating the highly personalized branch experience via multimodal AI, you know, agentic AI for voice agent, for call center, utilizing the capability similar to whatever the one of the China model called LARC. I don't know if you got it, right? But I could introduce later on, right? So when I design this, I overseeing not only the North America, but how China, the other superpower of the AI, right? But at the same time, reference the UK. I mean, how Europe is doing things, right? So that's why when I do it for a very comprehensive kind of scope, right? Blend, you know, synthesize a lot of things together, right? Carefully, right? It is open source, right? So microminers and microheart ontology part, I talked about it. I don't want to repeat too many times. But essentially, this is the heart of the business, right? Proprietary business ontology mappings, utilizing the, you know, different networks, IBM foundational models, you know, terminology, semantic layer from Microsoft, you know, banking industry, architecture, FTX, open banking, right? A lot of things, and the crypto exchange, you know, different models that we need to. That's what it is. That's number 4. Miners is more the Buddhism concept of the person, right? The 7th layer of 8-layer architecture of consciousness, right? That defines the person. You need to portray your customer, your partners, third-party risks as we manage the employees, agents, right? Let's give the agent this little soul, if you will. And that's where get into the business become the heart, where the soul lives in a way, right? I'm just metaphorically speaking, right? But if you put into the business ontology, that's what it is, right? Agent has to have a soul, right? If you look at the open claw, it has a file called soul.md markdown, right? Same thing, right? If you want to run an agent fleet of them, you need such a thing, okay? I mean, I didn't even know OpenClaw has that, but I designed it, right? The memory part is another one, obviously, right? How do you manage that? You know, make it a caching, distributed, replicating, make sure that resilient, right? So then number 5 is MacroQ. It's like messaging, right? It's more like a workflow. That's the heart of the scripting, right? Meridians from Chinese medicine, you know, the 12 meridians, right? You know, functionally. And then the 8 or other the more like lakes. That's where the caching data has come from, right? The design takes a lot of interdisciplinary thinking and you know, it's not philosophical, it's engineering, it's technology, however, right? So the central orchestrating hub for business processing modeling, notation, monitoring the agentic workflows, caching the data, using the message, make sure the memory is sustainable. This is where you need high-end chips, right? We need new large language model being utilized, right? And then 6 is where, what I'm going to build for the private models, right? We call it macro model, right? Multimodal. Then the matter is VLA, large language, and that's where you build the brain, right? The model intelligence directly and pluggable, but also one of the challenges is resolving the releases and the involvement. Do you need to retrain it? Do you need to fine-tune it? My answer is no, right? You have to make it more organic, right? That building is not that hard anymore, right? You should have an engineering way rather than every time build from scratch or get into the kind of upgrading kind of hell, right? Or whatever they lock you in for, right? If you know what you're building, when the new changes come, adding that is more or less amenable to automatically using a couple of agents to be able to handle it, different weight distribution, right? You don't need to retrain or recreate everything or get into the upgrade kind of challenges, right? This is called engineering. This architecture is not purely just wishful thinking, right? But that's a hard problem. Not many people have solved. That I did. I believe at least to a certain extent this works, right? The macro runtime is more, that is where in production, if you think about it, how do you deploy all these machine learning models, AI models, business ontology, agentic frameworks, all those caches, meridians, APIs, how do you deploy them? You need different runtime, right? But like a canary bird, like a PCO in a bank, right? Controlling an office, use your hand, very skillful hand, right? You think of a robotics, the hand is the most difficult part, right? That's what we build. But for agentic, part of the framework for agents, you have to handle them by using your hand, right? But doesn't mean that your human being has to have 10,000 hands split into half. No, you use the invisible hand in the AI sense. You need to handle each and every agent, if you will, right? That's what human in the loop. Doesn't mean everybody has to come to your eyes and you make a decision. Your hand is there to finger them, right? To control them, to manipulate them, to manage them, to govern them, right? You have to have a hand there, the most skillful part of your body, right? That's what I designed. It's part of the framework, right? Then, obviously, some gears, right? Governance, extension. That's why you need to reach out to the Anthropic OpenAI model. That's what you need. Some gears, make sure it is just very secure, airtight, right? And some arms is really for, if you need to, you can physicalize some of these controls, some of this capability, meaning you have to have your special devices. You're going to see the flourishing from different AI companies going to come up, so many, right? Like physical AI devices, physical memory devices, physical security devices. It's going to be many, right? It's a new world, right? A lot of new opportunities. External augmentation, that's what it is. Risk mitigation. Integrating third-party intelligence face the global macro kind of economic, right? Different regions have different regulations, right? Now, eventually, I already built a product called MaicroStudio, right? Can be physicalized, but again, build the macro ATM. I mentioned the asset tokenization machine, targeted specifically for the banks who are going to go. It's ready made. You can use it right away, right? The management system is also can be plugged into your ATM if you want. If you're interested in getting into the larger, tokenized asset market, right? Like, leading by other larger players, you could. That's our market, right? Plug and play. It is agentic, right? Enterprise agentic, sovereign agentic AI framework, right? It's all part of it, right? So this continuous interconnected flow ensures that data invited securely through the parameters defense, right? Like 9 regiments of your army, right? They collaborate, they mutate, right? They move, support each other, but you are the command, right? So think about it, from the military science, right? This is what AI is for, and I can trigger sort of autonomous tokenization, guided the regulations, business ontology compliance, and actions are constantly orchestrated and audited, right, by the central process monitors before being executed by domain-specific models, right, and applied to the physical and digital world, right? That's what it is, right? If I read it for you again, the continuous, interconnected, right? I mean, in one man, it's super clear, right? It's so simple, but again, if you think about it, if you notice, right, deeply interdisciplinary, bring the medical, finance, right, the military, strategic regiment, right, the war, industrialization, the quantum physics, right, engineering, it's all blended together, right? It's quite challenging thing to design, right? But again, I'm small, I has to be good, right? Because otherwise, how do you even survive, right? But can grow a lot, right? If I get a good partner or investor, right? It can go big. Probably can challenge, the Alibaba, or challenge the OpenAI. Doesn't matter, right? In the AI era, nobody is too small to grow. Nobody is too big to fail, right? Remember that. So I talked about lately Canada has a new way to building chips. Essentially, they bake the whole language model onto the chips. It's not innovation, as I said. Huawei already been doing that, local run, right? That's required, however, right? I think if you look at AMD, NVIDIA, they all have different way of doing the same thing, right? In a non-palace model, what I just mentioned, right? It is a broader AI architecture in play as well, right? In chips and computing, that's on layer 3, right? What it is, the physical hardware, right? We encourage local run, right? The engineering, it is more like an engineering layer. New chips will come out. New smaller models will be able to run locally, right? And the speed, the economic feasibility, right? The sheer scale of the AI model training and inference should happen locally, economically, right? So the global silicon kind of landscape remains heavily consolidated, but is experiencing fierce undercurrents. A lot of movement means, right? The competition, right, from China, and NVIDIA operates as the apex of the provider, like H100, right? Subsequently, Blackwell architecture and Robin, right? They'll come out every year as a new release, quite astounding. Doing really well, right? How many trillion? 6 trillion? 5 trillion? So 95% of the global AI training is there. But DeepSeek lately made a breakthrough. It can run and train, infer on the local, like domestic chips, like from Huawei, from how we see from others, right? And fab within China as well, right? So we have to see that, right? Certainly, the AMD also, they have MI300X or something like that, accelerator. The Intel, the Gandhi line, right? It's under new leadership. They're making progress, provide some vital secondary supply chains for Western enterprises, right? Void the lock-in, right? Especially like China part, they try to break through right? However, this is not easy, it's still emerging, right? The astronomical financial cost for the fab and design, severe environmental energy demanding, the sustainability question, right? The ESG kind of compliance is all part of the challenge, right? So associated the stockpiling for advanced US, operations, the chips, and it kind of prompt a lot of debate, the global search for more efficient computing architecture, right? So the most significant, obviously, and also strategic is the disruption in the engineering layer is from China. Despite the comprehensive US sanctions, the domestic ecosystem by Huawei ascent AI chips, as I mentioned, right? They're making a lot of advancement, right? So I need to stand up for a bit. What it is, right? The Shanghai SMIC, the Advanced Node Logic Chips Manufacturing, the CXMT, you know what it is, right? It's high bandwidth memory and emerge with unexpected strings. I mentioned that, but it is still kind of in the lab level. I'm not sure how they work in the industrial scale, right? What it is by heavily optimizing the software architecture, right, such as the Huawei's CAN ecosystem to maximize the compute efficiency, right? The Chinese developers have at least gained some breakthrough, achieved a top-tier model performance. On the hardware, it's not so top-notch, right, like the NVIDIA, right? That's a big breakthrough, right? Especially given that DeepSeek version 4, right? That's one of the celebrated features, right? You can run without CUDA, run on local domestic chips, right? And pretty efficiently, right? And the breakthrough also in the memory part, right? As I mentioned, electronically and engineering level, that logical chips and memory chips are different, right? They need different architecture, but the breakthrough is that they're able to combine that, right? In a new architecture, right? So that's quite significant. We have to see that, right? Each and everybody, not like NVIDIA, but the AMD, Google, AWS, and Macro, they all try to build chips, right? It is quite a profitable part of the overall business, right? That's layer 3, if you will. So we reviewed layer 1, elements and energy, layer 2, the infrastructure and information, and then we dived into the in-depth of the non-palace model, what is the frameworks all about, and then we come to 3, there's more chips and computing. Now we come to number 4, the foundational model. Okay, that is where we're going to build it, right? So let's review again. Let's take a refresher or recap. The proprietary and open weight foundational models. One is closed AI, the other is open source AI, in other words, right? So when we see a new private operating system for the enterprise agentic AI, what we mean that we not want to rely on a single monolithic vendor, okay? Each and every sizable institutions, financials or otherwise, like the hospitals, medical research, or government, or manufacturing, right? You should adopt a multi-model routing strategy, or better still, build your own quickly, efficiently, automatically, using agents, power of AI, right? Using AI for AI, right? Let's have to go that way. Think of the AI is not simply a technology, it's not a tool. Okay, it is more like a part of the workforce, if you will, right? You should use AI for AI, like what I do. I build a MaicroStudio using AI, right? Coding is totally automated, right? Not totally, I mean 90%, right? I write some code as well. Scripting, putting it together, right? But you have to balance the cutting edge capabilities, opportunity to cause, and the strict regulatory compliance, like I mentioned, data leakage, right? How do you know that if not your own, right? You have to really. So if you look at this, we cursory review the proprietary ecosystem Google, Gemini. The first and foremost, Google is quite formidable. It's a giant in computing and a entrenched enterprise footprint. Google has Gemini 1.5, 2.0, now 3.1, right? They have a lot of features, massive context windows, now up to 1 million, right, tokens, right? Think about it, 2 millions, right? And then the natively integrated text, image, video, you name it, right? It's multimodal. I use it, right? It's brilliant, right? It's fantastic, right? The deep mind has a real good mind, a lot of really smart man there. For a bank, however, right, the deep integration to Google Cloudflare is also an advantage, right? It is unparalleled ability to ingest, kind of, you can put a whole document there, right? It can sifting through all your data on the cloud, right? It's ideal for deep due diligence, contract analysis, and complex research synthesis, right? Anthropic Cloud, the latest model, Opals, right? The Sonnet model, leading the market, right? The complex analytic reasoning, advanced coding proficiently, right? The alignment heavy favored by major financial institutions for mission-critical mid-office tasks, right? The excels and rigorous instruction following is pretty astonishing, right? The lowest hallucination rate, in fact, right, than the peers by, benchmark. OpenAI, GPT, Microsoft 5, 5.2, 5.3, maybe 6, some still remain highly versatile, general purpose, sort of standard, LLMs, right? The Microsoft Azure, banks has access these powerful, models, OneLake, Microsoft Fabric, Power Apps, right? You name it. They have a lot of SharePoint, so much so the footprint everywhere in the enterprise, right? They have Copilot, right? And using heavily fortified compliant parameters, right? Leveraging them for broad organizational productivity and similar as Microsoft 360. But they are very horizontal in a way, right? I don't know if you heard the story, the market report, the Copilot didn't work out as expected, right? For a good reason, right? They're too passive in a way, right? They just dwell on the past success and forgot to really innovate, right? Just put a foundry able to switch and claim, assume everybody is going to use it. Well, the real world is way more complex than that, right? It's like Microsoft, OS, right? Never catch up like Unix. Why? Because they're very captive of the client interaction, but the real enterprise, pretty heavyweight, way more complex with concurrency demand, right? The multi-model kind of, it's not that easy to manage, right? It's not a Copilot can do, right? You look at the generated diagrams, try to draw architectures and flow, it's too bad, right? At least not up to the level, but again, Figma gained a lot of market share, right? And for good reasons. And some of the new vendors they propose, right? But again, in the future, who need Figma, right? It's all agent. They don't need a UI to punch in the numbers, right? Or go to the little spreadsheet and enter the numbers. No, they don't. They know the context. Why do they even need to do that, right? That's what I'm thinking, right? But again, the IBM What's Next and Graffiti, right? The BAI proposal, right? The 3.3, 4.0. Now I don't know, it's 4.5 or whatever that is. It's unique, tailored to the enterprise data and lexicode translation, right? They have it, right? You don't need to translate it. You don't need to replace it. They provide critical indemnification for its models and delivers high-speed inference optimized for safe, compliant business applications, making it really highly attractive, in my opinion, right? for most financial institutions quite conservative. This is a safe bet than using Anthropic to rewrite COBOL program, right? Okay. What I'm going to put forward is the sovereign open weight, open source AI approach, right? Okay, if you use Mistral from France, Alibaba's Queen, ByteDance, have something in the US, but majorly China, and then DeepSeek, Minimax, or GLM for coding, Minimax for workflow. They're all pretty good, right? Anthropic and OpenAI is good, but they're all equally good or better, right? Very competitive. So, but I would say build on top of that rather than use it off the shelf because you might facing sanctions. But if you build it by use it like the way I would do it for you, the risk is on me, right? Okay, because it's open source, you can copy and paste, right? And use with some license. You can attach, make it your own if you will, right? And you can make sure it is absolutely not data leakage, right? Whatever the claim is kind of false, right? You can monitor everything, right? Within your network, totally with your hand, you control it. You can track it if you want to, right? You can kill it if you want to, right? But you can use it absolutely safe, right? That is the way I propose, right? So DeepSeek is more like for, especially using advanced mixture of expert architecture. They have a sparse attention model, right? Multi-fold kind of workflow, right? Management, right? But again, it's a fraction of the cost of the others. If you want to use it right away, that's okay, right? And a massive context window, And Alibaba Queen, they have many models, right? They have 3.5 native visual agent capabilities, right? Allowing the model to interact with computer applications, right, and operating the 60% of the lower cost, right, than previous iterations. ByteDance continued to evolve in the Double 2.0, right? But they try to pull it away from the enterprise because the sanctions likely going to come, right? So that's why, the direct, but CDance is what I use for video generation. It's pretty impressive. Probably better, not better, cheaper than Sora or than View from Google, and but the Sora is from OpenAI. Right? Comparatively, Anthropic only have a little to offer, although the one part of it they try to claim the best, right, enterprise. But soon, OpenAI, Google, they'll catch up. It's very little strategic mode or deterrent there, right? Not a lot of protection, really. Mistral is one of the things you might consider as well. Previously, provide a robust open weight model that prioritize European data sovereignty, right? The GDPR kind of regulations. It's essentially a hedge for global banks must navigate across border data privacy and stuff, right? Data privacy is a huge burden, right? That even the model use it for inference, you might break in some of the European Union kind of regulations, right? You have to be very careful on that. Now we come quickly to layer 5, right? So what is layer 5? It's applications, right? Put it simply, AI agent, AI assistant, agentic AI, whatever you call it. You build some foundational models, right? Layer 5 is where the agentic framework comes, the SAFE, what it is, sovereign agentic AI framework, right? That becomes the core, right? Where static intelligence is transformed into the dynamic, autonomous sort of executional logic, right? It's like a coding, scripting, right? A program. Enterprise agentic AI involve deploying autonomous systems capable of planning, executing, monitoring the external tools, and monitoring long-running processes across mainframe, the modern ERPs or on-cloud microservices. Right? Agentic orchestration framework. That's what we need in what we call the macro hand part, right? But we just build on top of it, make it more manageable, right? More flexible, if you will, more precise. Okay, so LangChain, I would say, is still one of the best. Right? It's mostly JavaScript, right? Python, right? It is kind of stateful, cyclical, the graph routing. So I think the best by far, right? I use it. Ideal for the complex financial sort of reconciliation when agents must revisit previous steps and correct themselves, right? You might have to file out 5 different logical reasoning branches, and then you pick the right one, right? It's not just singleton, right? It's not linear, right? That is where you gain some advantage, right? That's what DeepSeek give you, right? Multifold. And then the semantic level kernel, right? Microsoft offers, they're more C#, right? Python, Java, right? Middleware planner. Crow AI is Python, right? AutoGen, right? I would say LangChain, right? Still the best. So the AI coding assistant, okay? That is where we talked a lot, right? For the bank's engineering team, they have just iterate, modernizing thousands of chaotic business process layers on top of the mainframe systems. It's quite challenging, right? Specialized AI coding systems regulate, it could help, right? Like Cursor, you know, and Windsor, I don't know who is acquired, you know, by whom, by some other, like Cursor developed by that, right? And there's some others, like Lavlin or something, right? I forgot it. It's one of the top engineer come out of OpenAI or Anthropic or somewhere, build a new one, right? It's all good, right? I mean, come down to the infrastructure, right? Modernizing does not necessarily mean rip and replace. Right? It's always emphasized that platforms like AWS transformation from the AI-driven modernization, you can extract that from COBOL if you want to, and GCL. You can utilize it to rewrite. But concurrently, right, you know, they done a lot of migration to the microservice, if you say, right? But IBM Watson-X, the code assistant for ZOS, right, acts as intelligent middleware, allowing natural language agents to query the actual balances in IBM mainframe. That's a safer bet, in my opinion, right? Execute the transfers without human intervention, right? That's what I really recommend, right? Now we quickly come to the layer 6, right? I think we answered the question whether you need to rip and rewrite, right? Especially in the mainframe part. Try to use Watson-X, right? To do that intelligent query, right? Rather than replace the COBOL program. That's my recommendation, right? But make your decision. Maybe your special business case warrant one way or the other, right? So the zenith of the 6th layer architecture, right, is on the layer 6. That's where physical AI and sovereign robotics, yeah, that's what I mean, right? So we're beyond the current enterprise AI, but it's the top line of business, core of my business, right? Think of the name Maicrobotix as it means, right? The traditional banking is largely digital endeavor. The physical footprint of top-tier banks, retail branches, and corporate office, and massive data centers is expensive, right? Essentially, they're going to logistics, manufacturing, the trajectory of approaching the physical is still years away, right? In my opinion, right? But again, if you look at the industry, the Google DeepMind, the NVIDIA, right? Some physical intelligence, right? Simulation, digital twin kind of AI devices are coming, right? So some of the robotics, the transitioning from a backspoke single task programming to the deployment of a unified foundational model. For example, Google DeepMind, Gemini Robotics, and RT2, they pioneered the vision, language, and action, right? This model allow. If you go back to the CES, the 2026 in Las Vegas, right? Jason Huang made the headline like physical AI factory kind of thing, right? Embedded AI. It's coming, but it's still a little immature in my opinion, right? Some AI device is going to come out, but for the enterprise to use, still years away, right? So the physical intelligence also, right? Some startup like physical intelligence have introduced a model like Pi Zero, right? What it is, it's like advanced flow matching architecture to generate highly dexterous natural motions in humanoid robots, right? Dexterity-wise. There's some open source from Hugging Face. They have some model, right? The Stanford, the Octo, and Open VLA, UC Berkeley, they provide some generalist robot, for training OpenX embodiment data set, right? They could use it. That's what the innovation is, right? But still, they're a little premature for really enterprise, especially banks to embrace, right? So we have to wrap it up, So what do I need to recap, right? So I try to make a comment. It's not just banks, but we have to look at the cross-industry agentic synergy, right? Healthcare, legal, heavy industry. So what we mean by that is that the primary focus is transformation. Obviously, banking will be pioneer that, right? Traditionally, banking is quite quick and first to invest, right? Because they see the opportunity, they want to seize it, right? There are a lot of cash as well. Enterprise agentic AI is inherently horizontal technology, I would say that, right? Examining its its deployment adjacent highly regulated sectors, providing strategic footprint and identify specialized sort of vendors. It is essential. We need to watch out for the legal and the corporate governance, right? Like, especially for the health. Legal AI, they have a lot of vendors already. Like talking about the banking compliance, the contract generation, RWA tokenization, case text is Harvey and Luminance, right? Provide some enterprise scale generative AI, specially tuned for the legal research, automated due diligence, and complex contract. So the banks deploy agentic AI. They are treating the systems as synthetic employees, right? That require HR-style evaluation, continuous monitoring, and strict governance and guardrails. It's a paradigm shift, I'll say that. But my line of products called MicroLawyer does more than that, right? And I believe it's the way to go, right? Because that is based on the SAFE framework, utilizing the 6 layers of architecture, right? And very domain specific, has microminers in it, has ontology in it for each and every enterprise to be deployed into it, part of the workforce, right? So it's not a single technology deployable, right? It's the workforce kind of pitch, right? Health AI, is the other part. What I delivered again is a macro doctor, but look at what on the industry, right? The healthcare sector mirrors the banking into zero tolerance of policy. The data privacy, HIPAA, and algorithm hallucination is absolutely not acceptable. The top vendors would be like Hidi Health and Suki AI, focusing on the sort of ambient clinical documentation and physical productivity. Cure, try to make the sound, and AI dog, okay, radiology, diagnostic automation, and Hippocratic AI, specialized in patient triage agents, right? It's all very good, right? My macro doctor is the synthesizing the modern Western medicine with the traditional Chinese medicine, right? That's the area and domain that I'm looking for. Pro-human health, that's my ultimate goal, right? You need to really thinking for the patient more than thinking for the medicine, right? Pro-human meaning like you need to take some, the preventative measures to harness the power of AI and robotics for that person, right? It's not just give it a better pill and see the X-ray better, right? I think to me that's, it's going to be thousands, millions but what I'm doing towards redefine the human life science, right? The health in a new angle that more harnessing the power of AI and robotics, right? Make the person at the center of the health. Pro-life, pro-human, right? That's the focus, right? But in any case, some of the heavy industry, mining and pharmaceuticals, right? The banking and financing sort of physical asset, but where the asset is from mining, for example, right? So supply chains, logistics, the chalking and the silver in the beginning of the year, right? I've made a bit of talking there, right? It's quite significant, rare earths, right? All kind of petroleum need refinement, right? And the AI vendors in this space, like earth, mineral deposit extraction, cosmos, green energy, that is more like robotics automation, right? The mining part, right? Spectre, the asset health monitoring, right? Apply computer visions and predictive analytics to harsh physical environment, right? AWA, tokenization, RWA, real world data asset expands to tokenizing commodities and physical energies. The AI robotics be specially applicable. You have to monitor that, right? You have to really inspect that, right? How do you make sure? You have to monitor it, right? Into the financial ledger, the Agentic Oracle will become a highly lucrative next generation banking service. The blockchain integrated, right? Have to have entity on the blockchain, right? Before you even dig them mine, you have to put in a blockchain first, right? They monitor the process, right? And tokenize that. You can really provide stunning, liquidity there, make it flow faster, right? Now, eventually, we need to close the AI governance. We talk about it in the safe, sovereign, agentic AI framework, obviously, safety, right? Governance, risk management, compliance automation. That's at the heart, right? That's built into our macro heart, right? So the deployment enterprise agentic AI introduced novel existential risk. I would say a lot of risks you don't even know today, right? We have to get into that. Then you know, then you mitigate it, right? But you have to do a lot of analysis, research, not just let's wait. No, you cannot do that, right? You have to put a fundamental guardrail. That's why I put macro minus and macro soul, a heart in it, right? So the autonomous agent acting across the disparate data silos, right, to constantly executing the live financial transactions monitoring, right? If it is compromised, if it is misaligned, if it is poorly designed, it's going to cause catastrophic regulatory breaches, risk, repetition loss, right? Big regulatory fines, massive, financial losses as well, right? Especially in the payment part. The regulation is not that clear, right? You have to provide fully governed and explainability, right? Therefore, the rigorous AI governance is not merely an administrative afterthought. It has to be a vital enabling. That's why we designed it right into the heart. Okay, they call it macro heart, right? You need continuous innovation, right? By 2026, the student legislation like the EU AI Act, and the New York City's law mandate strict transparency, right? And bias control and the continuous risk management, the AI governance platform. A lot of things going on, right? So CloudEdge.ai recognizing is a market leader for discovering shadow AI, right? Unauthorized, in the shadows, right? Like shadow banking, right? covertly by employees, right? And insider trading, insider risks, third-party risks, immense, right? Especially when you come to the agent, how do you know the agent that you develop, you deploy, right? More than a virus, right? Can execute, right? Autonomous access governance, SOC 2, SOC 2, right? GDPR, EU AI Act compliance. So IBM, what is next? Again, governance, essentially for highly regulated industry offering end-to-end AI lifecycle management, rigorous risk management assessment, model drift tracking, bias, algorithmic accountability. Yeah, that's one I still recommend IBM. It's better, right? The holistic AI and money. There are many others, right? So, but there are more. Okay. So essentially, you need to mitigate the risk, make sure they comply to the. That's where the macro meridian come into this, right? So it's like everywhere you have to make sure you're interconnected. Risk is always on the hook, right? And so autonomous agent has to be speaking the special language, not English, not COBOL, right? Not Chinese, right? In a coded cryptography way, you need a new protocol. I would say that, right? That's how I design it. So we need to really close, right? It's over 2 hours, right? So we summarized, right? So 6 layers, if you will, and from above 2 and to 6, that's the 9 pillars, if you will. On the left is lift, on the right is wall, right? So it is simple to me. In my mind, it's almost like I look at my finger or thinking of my nose, right? But again, to articulate it and make it into product, the engineering plug into the large financial ecosystems, it takes a bit of challenge, right? Just communicating the message, right? I think, we're going to come revisit some specifics, but I think I give you overall kind of landscape, each and every part of it, right? The architecture. So we mentioned the workforce. That's what I'm going to majorly focus on, the macro banker, macro doctor, and macro lawyers, right? But to enable all of this, you need macro heart and macro brain, right? I advocate to build a private operating system that encompasses the domain-specific multimodal models, data models, business ontology, right? The process semantics, right? And then you need to have the SAFE, the sovereign agentic AI framework, SAFE, right? So really, that's my innovation. I have the products. I build up the business. I'm here, hopefully, to build a partnership, right? If you happen to see this, and probably very few people are going to come to see this, reach out, and then we have a chat, and come to the cafe, we can talk, right? Also, building up the macro, business bar, right? Maicrobotix business bar. I'm sitting in the studio, and we could chat and talk and see some demo, right? If you need more information, obviously you can get it, right? So, all right, thank you. It's a long chat, right? Hopefully you got something here. The theme is, we try to build up the enterprise agentic AI, the technology stack and the platform for the large financial institutions, for example, for predictable return on investment, right? And explain the what, the how, and why, with some details, right? So we could continue to drill down and also review a lot of vendors' technologies, right? How things are done and how we do it differently, more innovatively, right? What recommendations, what are the options, right? But decision eventually is yours, right? So take my advice with a grain of salt, right? But if you want more, and we can chat, sit down and look at your particular scenario, right? To give you more nuanced and substantive advice, recommendation. And best of all, if you could build up partnership, could make it happen. So so you can see it and touch and feel it, tangibly result. It's result oriented. If you don't get results, I don't charge you at all, right? It's simple like that, right? All right, thank you.
对酒当歌，人生几何？譬如朝露去日苦。